Today we're doing our second or third HD video. Is actually our second video in 1080i that's being down converted for YouTube. The video I just shot in the hospitality kit at 720p wasn't a great 720p, so I'm going to consider this actually round two for videos in a high definition. Point of understanding is that to get this in high definition, if you're watching this on YouTube, if this is another site, you're not going to be able to see this in high definition. If you're on my site, there are going to be some other versions that you can click on. But if you're on YouTube, on the bottom right part of the screen down here, you'll see, is it right? No, left. Sorry, bottom left part of the screen, you'll see watch in higher quality. So over here, I think. Watch in higher quality. Click on that, and then you're going to see, I'm going to write it here on the words, the code to go into higher definition mode. You have to have a very fast broadband connection, very fast. It's the ampersand FMT equals 22. Stick that on the end of your URL and hit return, and bam, you're going to see high quality. It's gorgeous. Okay, let's get to our topic today. Today we're going to talk about transplants. We're going to talk about understanding the difference between a fat transplant or fat grafting and a hair transplant. It's something that I lectured in St. Louis, and all my patients that come and ask me about this, I always say, go to look at that video. Well, I want to create a dedicated video to this. It's actually going to be explained in my new book, Aging Face, New Paradigm, coming out next year. And it's an original thought of mine. So I want to compare a lot of different ideas about this. A lot of people say, why does a fat transfer drop in quality, so to speak, at 3 months and then start to build again at 6 months and beyond? The reason for that is very analogous to a hair transplant, because a hair transplant at a few weeks to a month, you shed out the old hair that you transplant in, and then nothing grows until about 6 months. So I was reading this book, Hair Transplantation, 4th edition by Walter Unger, and I was looking at it, and I was looking at exactly the evolution of a hair graft, and it was really quite interesting, because what happens is over the period of the first few months, you get what's called primary and secondary inosculation, which is almost the way that tree branches interdigitate and become one single tree branch over a short period of time. Neovascularization, which means the new, actually fresh new blood that supplies that graft, starts at 6 months and then continues to improve that hair graft until about 18 months. Well, a fat transplant is very analogous to that, because it's a free graft. It's a graft that has no blood supply plugged in, and it takes that time to graft and plug in. So a lot of times the reason a graft at 3 months doesn't look so impressive is the swelling is gone, and the result, the blood supply hasn't kicked in yet. So I want you to understand, at 3 months, if you do a bad job, most places that do fat grafting can't get into the neovascularization or growth at 6 months, and they start to drop, just like hair transplants. When a hair transplant is not done well, you can have no growth or poor growth, and that is decided not at 9 months, it's decided at 3 months, where the graft is not growing as well, and it starts to not grow at 9 months. And then sometimes the grafts just take a little while to wake up. So I've seen even hair transplants and fat transplants or fat grafts start to grow at about a year. So it's a really interesting thing. And there was a study that a colleague of mine did that was really quite brilliant, looking at volumetric shapes and volumetric volumes of fat transfers over a period of 18 months. And what they found using a computer modeling device, so in other words, there was no real subjective evaluation, it was just a computer modeling of a face, that at 3 months the volumes were actually almost the same as pre-op. And then at 6 months, at 9 months, each month that went by, the volumes increased up to about 18 months. And this is, again, an objective, unequivocal, scientific computer modeling study on volume. So that, to me, is really, really interesting. The other thing, I got a forum post this weekend that stimulated my thinking about this, and I haven't really articulated this in a video, and I thought I would take this time to do that, which is to think about, over the long-term, safety. Or what are the things that go on? Let's use the hair transplant model once again. If, for example, a 25-year-old comes in for a hair transplant, I've got to be very, very careful, because he's going to continue to lose hair. There will be lifetime changes that I've got to think about. Let's take that same person at 35 and 45. It is much safer for me to transplant him because, one, he has a limited supply of paint for me to cover the canvas, if you will. And I don't want a significant recession to occur. I run out of donor hair to do what I need to do and keep my result looking natural. Now, do I do 20-some-year-olds for hair transplant? Yeah, I did one last week, a 27-year-old. Why? One, family history wasn't significant for hair loss. That is an approximation of safety, because if his father at 40 had a horseshoe ring on the back of his head, I probably wouldn't go and transplant him. Second of all, he had good donor hair, so he had a lot of paint for me to fill. Third of all, I did a more conservative hairline for him that would look natural at 40 and 50. Third of all, I was looking at this area and he wasn't rapidly progressing in hair loss. So there are a lot of clues that help me make a decision for long-term safety. So let's for a moment use that same model and understand long-term safety with fat transplants. The lady that emailed me said she was 29 and wanted a fat transplant. I said, well, Dr. Lamb, you must be insane. Are you doing young women and trying to make them look younger? Well, she was gaunt, and she probably had some early signs of aging, maybe from sun exposure, maybe just her genetics. And what are the long-term consequences of fat grafting that I've got to think about for you? Well, here they are. Basically, the fat is a live graft. Just as much as a hair will grow when you cut it, the fat can shape and blend, which means to me, if you gain 50 pounds, that's a problem. So how do I look at safety? Well, a few things. If you're 29, 30, just as a hair transplant, I'm more conservative. I have to be more conservative with you because I'm thinking, maybe you're not thinking, but I'm thinking 5 or 10 years down the road, how to stay safe with you. You need to stay safe. You need to think long term. As much as I had a 27-year-old gentleman come in and said, I need a hairline like this, and I'm accepting nothing less than that, I said goodbye. And that's important you understand that you choose me as much as I choose you. I don't do ridiculous things for you because I'm thinking long-term safety. Well, let's look at that in terms of a family history too. If both of your parents were very bone thin at 30 and all of a sudden they've blown up at 40 or 50, then maybe the genetics are predisposing you toward heaviness down the road, and maybe I won't even do your fat transfer. Maybe I got to be so conservative that I don't do it. Maybe both your parents are very thin, you've been thin all your life, you haven't had much weight fluctuation. Then I can think, okay, well maybe we can still do the procedure, but like a hair transplant, let's do a more conservative one because you're under 30. So these are things that I really want you to think about. It's not just the quality, the technical quality of what I do, not just the artistry, but I want to think about long-term safety. So I think this model of using hair transplant and fat transplant are very interesting.